Hello everybody and welcome to High Plane Racing's Indycar 2026 kind of preview slash a little bit of predictions at the end. The predictions I found for Indycar really difficult to do, and so I'm prepared to have so much egg on my face that I'll be an omelette basically. Apologies for the background and my hair. I'm still having an awful lot of life transition whilst trying to launch this channel, so just bear with me. Without further ado, let's dive into the deck. Alrighty, so IndyCar 2026 preview and thoughts. I thought it was worthwhile quickly covering a couple of big highlight points before we dive into the actual kind of team by team, driver by driver kind of narrative, I think, for 2026 and how that's all working. So firstly, with the off-season highlights, we've got Honda and Chevy both signing up for a multi-year commitment to IndyCar. I don't think we know how many years a multi-year commitment is. I would imagine it's probably 3 to 5, maybe to take us up to 2030, because lots of things seem to be like, let's keep going to 2030 and see what happens. So great for the sport. I think it kind of ensures that there's some kind of competition there at the base engine level, because I think they're both kind of in it to make sure that they can compete against each other. And if it was just a one-make manufacturer, then yeah, it kind of becomes a little bit less interesting and important for Honda, Chevy and anyone else that wants to come along to do. So I think that's great, and it secures a sport for the future. Secondly, Prema, who joined last year fielding 2 cars, will not be present at the beginning of the season because they're up for sale. I find that a real shame, because Prema have got such a great legacy over in European series, particularly with Formula 2, F3. I think they do a couple of other random series dotted around as well in the F4 categories, because it's far more regional then. But yeah, it's a real shame that it's just not kind of worked out for them. The team's up for sale. They hope with that sale comes to fruition that they'll be along maybe for the April races onwards at best. But I do hope that they do join 1 or 2 cars to get the field up to 26 or 27. So we currently have a field of 25 going racing at St. Pete. We also have the Freedom 250 race at Washington DC being added to the calendar. I have so many thoughts to say about this, but at risk of becoming a political nightmare on video too, I won't. But it's nice to see a new race onto the calendar, and I'm delighted that it's as well as instead of one of the Milwaukee Mile races. So the other point is that the Milwaukee Mile is still a double header, which is great because it gives us kind of synergy of 6, 6 and 6 for road, oval and street races, which tickles my pickle in a weird way, but also it continues to show why I love IndyCar, because it's almost like a triathlon of open wheel racing, because you've got the 3 disciplines, they're very different and they require different skill sets. And so just like a triathlon where you're running, swimming and cycling, 3 different disciplines, but it's all about doing the best that you can with the body that you've got and the mind that you've got. And so that's kind of what draws me to IndyCar, and I like to see that stabilisation so that it's not going towards one discipline more than another. And the final thing, and maybe this is just me going, why are we allowing disreputed people back into sports? Because we've got Flavio Briatore doing this and really driving me up the wall over in F1. Tim Cendric has returned back to the pit wall less than a year after being sacked or released from his contract last year after all of the IndyCar shenanigans. And there's just a general theme, I think, in 2026 of IndyCar making sure that its officialdom and rule sets are being followed down to the wire, and to be more transparent about that as a whole with the general Penske riddlement. I think I'll just leave it at that. And I think IndyCar is trying to go to great lengths to make sure that it can be transparent where possible, and that can only be a good thing for the sport. So, with those kind of things out of the way, let's dive into team by team, who be doing what, and what do I think of their 2026 chances, I guess. So we'll kick off with AJ Foyt Enterprises. 2 beautiful liveries here. I really like, in fact, I must say the IndyCar liveries are so much more popping and vibrant and full of personality, so much more so than many other series that are out there. So, chef's kiss for me. Kaio Collet, first one up, is one of 3 new rookies into the IndyCar grid this year. I think Kaio Collet, though, is going to be the most crash happy of the trio, and he needs to keep his pace calm. Sorry, he needs to show his raw pace, but keep his temper calm. I don't want to go like, he's a Brazilian, he's going to be very dramatic. But he's shown repeatedly throughout his career that he does like a little crasheroo, and whilst he is quite fast, he's erratic. And so actually out of the 3 rookies, he's got the one for potentially the highest highs, but I think he will regularly hit those troughs more often than other drivers and the other duo of rookies as well. So I'd like him to make sure that he smooths that out, and I think he'll be potentially the one that grabs the most headlines out on track, but maybe not for always the right reasons. And Santino Ferrucci, I think for me, is around, can he get that first win? That'll be very interesting. He needs to replicate his 2024 form. Well done. Because that was when he placed, I think it was 9th in the standings. And it's his only top 10 final standings of his career to date, as far as I remember. And he's always kind of like, the commentators love to shout him out. I think it's because it's a homegrown American that kind of pops out, particularly on ovals, and does great things. But he lacks that consistency for me. And so he has the opportunity to go missing and let his off-track banter then start to drive his on-track antics. And he just needs to make sure that they kind of stay a bit compartmentalised in his head, because he's got great potential, but he just needs to deliver in on it, rather than going, I think, personality first sometimes, and then raw racing kind of comes a bit of a second. So 2 rough diamonds here at AJ Foyt that I think could go either way. And when you look at my final standings for them on my last slide, I think it's going to slide as much as it will do peak. Andretti Global, I think, is going to be very interesting this year. And apologies, I don't have PowerPoint, and I tried to do this on OpenOffice Impress, and the ability to line up anything on that bloody app is ridiculous. I will need to sort this out for future videos. Looking at the liveries here, 3 gorgeous liveries. Why isn't Cadillac adding the TWG yellow onto its car? Really annoys me for F1, because Will Power's TWG livery is so much better. The JM Bullion one, I think, looks quite banky and very finance heavy. And I do love that beautiful teal on Marcus Ericsson's Delaware Life. So yes, nice clean lines as well. Anyway, less about the liveries, more about what's going on in the cars. Obviously, one of the biggest stories, and I chose to leave it out of the first slide just so that we could talk about it here, is Will Power's move from Penske to Andretti. This is for me, settle in and smash it year, because people have been really ramping this up as it's going to be I'm going to take them all out, revenge tour, blah, 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 blah. And Will Power is so fiery, you wouldn't put it past him. But I think what's more important for him is the battle for leadership in the Andretti Global team, because you've got Marcus Ericsson, who's had an atrocious 2025 and needs to bounce back, because otherwise I think he might get the boot. It's contract year for him. And Kyle Kirkwood was in that ascendancy, and he was so fine at the beginning third, really, of 2025 before it kind of wilted off over time. Kyle Kirkwood needs to show that stamina over a season and kind of level out the troughs. Marcus Ericsson really needs to show what he was doing back in the 2021s and 2022s, where he's getting those wins and was in title contention up until the last couple of races for those years. He's got people who are not quite, I'm going to say the full ticket, but that's not what I mean. They're not showing that full top tier level of class. And so Will Power needs to come in and dominate and own that team through controlled aggression so that he has battle for leadership. Because I think if Ericsson's a bit wobbly, which so far is not looking the case, he's put in a good stake straight in testing and in first practice. Spoiler, I'm doing this just before second practice for St. Pete. all looking good there. Kyle Kirkwood obviously straight on the ball as well, because he does very well in the streets and he needs to capitalise on that, but also raise up that kind of oval side of stuff. This is the time for Will Power to go, no, boosh, I'm in charge, thank you, and put everything behind him. And I think that's going to be a big story about who comes out of Andretti Global on top, because I think that will define what becomes Will Power's future. If Kyle Kirkwood is going to stay and be a supporting role or take leadership, and frankly, if Marcus Ericsson actually stays at Andretti at all, or gets pushed off elsewhere and maybe out of the sport entirely. And so those three stories all heavily interlink for me about making sure that they become the most capitalised possible. And there's an outside chance for me. I don't think, it's weird, I don't think Andretti is going to be here battling for titles. I do think they're going to be battling for top fives in points and standings though. So how that goes will be quite interesting. And for me, I think Kyle Kirkwood is potentially the leader of those trio over the season, depending on how Will Power settles. Next up are the Papaya clan of Arrow McLaren. And again, this is three really interconnected, very interesting stories. So Pato O'Ward, I think, is back for another title bid, and he needs to just keep doing what he was doing in the second half of 2025. He had a wonky start, and then it just kind of gathered momentum, and he was the form guy in many ways towards the back end of the season. And to do that, he will then lead the team and continue on that form to make sure that his title bid is really firm, and firm from the outset, not coming in as a late charger when the pressure is off and like you've got nothing to lose. And maybe that's how Pato rolls and does best, but he needs to show that he can handle the pressure up front and then not be like a burn from the back type thing. Christian Lundgaard, jumping across to that, I think it's time for him to start winning. He showed so much promise last year. It didn't always come together, and it's about making sure that he's got that consistency so that he can have a bid for top 5 in points, because I think he's got an outside chance of being able to do that by being consistent. And if he can get a couple of wins under his belt and just make sure that some of those more anonymous weekends kind of lift up a bit, then I think Lundgaard starts to deliver on all of the promise that he showed in F2 and so far in IndyCar, and will deserve his stay at Arrow McLaren. For me, Nolan Siegel is in a make or break season to convert it or drop. I have been really... everyone here is deserving and they're all fantastic at their sports, but I was quite underwhelmed at 2025's version of Nolan Siegel, and I need him to start bringing in those top 10 finishes, of which he had very few last year in an Arrow McLaren. And so he at very least needs at least one podium, bring in more regular top 10s, and he needs to show progression so that things start to feel a little bit more at home and can like reduce down the regular gap between Pato and Christian. And then I feel like if there's progression, then there's a warrant for an existing future at Arrow McLaren. If not, he might be yet another one that gets jettisoned from the Papaya troop. Chip Ganassi is an interesting selection as well. Loving the Sunoco livery back. I know it's nostalgic, but yes. And the DHL always looks fab, particularly on an IndyCar as well, now that we've not got Jordan in F1. But, and to be fair, I do also like the PNC Bank logo as well. It's a trio of gorgeous cars with some rather gorgeous drivers inside who are busy battling for different honours at different points in their career, but I can kind of do it on new records, or new personal records, I guess is the theme for Chip Ganassi Racing. You've got Alex Palou, who I put Connect 4, or 4 in a row, because that would be absolutely stunning if he can do it, and I think he absolutely can. And for him, this is more about, he's done everything that he needs to do. Now it's about record breaking. And so with the kind of mess of his contracts now completed and dealt with, he's going to be even clearer in his head, which means whelp for the rest of the grid, basically. And so how much stronger will he be with that not now being in his headspace? Because no matter who you are, if you're being dragged through court through legal battles and it's going to cost you millions of quids or dollars, that's going to take some mental capacity away from you, even if that's not directly in the car during the race itself. It's everything outside of it. And so for me, this is Alex Palou's version of let's go for most wins in a season. Can he do it? I'm not sure he can, because I think the rest of the grid will have stepped up again, especially because there's no real like big technical changes this year, so it's just about optimization of what's left. And you'd in theory think Alex has already reached closer to his ceiling than maybe some others, but we'll see. One of the people who I think has got the opportunity to reach higher for his ceiling is Scott Dixon. He doesn't need a win, he needs wins plural this year, and I'm banking on him getting them. But he'll get them more through his usual sly fox strategies rather than out and out pace, because he just like magically appears at the end, surprise, without much kind of warning or fanfare. But I think between him and Alex, it's going to be a battle of mind and body, because Scott Dixon is an elder statesman in IndyCar. I think he's got plenty of life in the old dog yet, but it's up to him. And because going back to those sly fox strategies, it's not just about reflex times and like having such innate knowledge of all of these tracks. He knows exactly where to place the car and all of that kind of stuff to push and not have mechanical issues or weird crashes, for example, which is funny given that he's already crashed in FP1, it's a pin. But it's also in Alex Palou's he's met his match mentally in terms of strategy and playing the car and always going to 9/10 and never knowing most of 9 times out of 10 to never go over it. So I find that battle fascinating, and that will continue on in 2026. On the other side, I think we've got the opportunity for someone to have their biggest step forward year on year for quite some time in Kyffin Simpson. He's learning from the best, and he needs to continue to learn more from the best. I mean, what better duo of drivers could you learn from? I think coming up for more podiums will be a huge thing for him. Towards the back end of last year, there was definitely like a turning point for him. And if that enables him to then reduce the deficit more consistently race on race, I think Kyffin Simpson has the opportunity for more podiums, more top 5s and top 10s, and he could be a little mini dark horse. I'm not saying like he's going to be in championship contention or anything like that whatsoever, but he might be nibbling around the top 10 in points if he pulls everything together and gets it right. Dale Coyne Racing, I think, have a fantastic duo of drivers. I'm going to struggle to spot the difference between those two cars a million miles an hour, but I do like the crossfade dark liveries on them. Romain Grosjean is back in the car for what I think is his swan song era, at least in open wheel racing. I think if everything comes together, he's got an outside chance of a random win and getting his first win in Indy, and probably maybe his last and only. But it would be a nice way to kind of round off his open wheel racing career, so that's kind of more of a poetic thing for me. But the thing with Romain Grosjean, and I don't know what his mindset is in 2026, but whenever he does well, it's normally when he's staying humble. And so as soon as he lets the frustration get to him, it then boils over and it becomes messy. And back with Dale Coyne again, which is where he did his best IndyCar work, in my opinion, I think that humble, not backmarker team necessarily, but you're kind of the underdog fighting against each other, lets Romain Grosjean put his best foot forward, so long as he doesn't get frustrated at the underdog status and the stuff that's available to him. So long as he enjoys the ragtag muffin brigade, he'll do well. I'm not so sure on how that will play out. Dennis Hauger, for me, is going to be Rookie of the Year, and I don't think it will be close. I think Dennis Hauger really had some duff luck in F2. He was fab in F3, but he needs to learn to not overdrive the car. One of his traits through F2 was how politics, strategy, and things outside of his control would quite often make him rant and rave. And IndyCar will be full of that. Yellow flags, being off strategy and then something changing and putting you back down the field when you're doing very well. And it's at those things that he would bubble over. And so he needs to make sure that his innate pace, just let it come and let everything that's outside of your control just be oh well, continue on. And I think he will be blindingly quick and he'll be very quick to pick up the pace. So I think he'll be Rookie of the Year. I don't think it will be close. Watch me be wrong. ECR, Ed Carpenter Racing, popping some yellow onto the grid. And I think this is going to be really interesting. I find ECR so difficult to rank, which is why I'm going to be well off, I'm sure, on my predictions table at the end. I think Alexander Rossi has got a battle on his hands to stay as team leader, but a lot of that will depend on how many times Christian Rasmussen lets his flair get the better of him and he smashes into a wall or into another driver and causes himself all kinds of issues. And so these two stories for me are so interlinked. You've got Christian Rasmussen just reining that flair 5% and a second win will come and you'll be able to battle for team leadership. But if he doesn't do that, it will be an absolute crash-tastic season. Alexander Rossi will be able to be the default team leader, but then I worry about Rossi being able to convert on the promise that he keeps showing year after year after year that never quite happens. Sometimes it's strategy, sometimes it's his own doing, and sometimes he just is totally anonymous. And I'm like, where he be? And so he needs to have less of those and just hanging around those kind of top 10 finishes and surprising people by just being consistent. And then I think good days will come. But I find this team by far the hardest to rank. And I do think the more I think about it now, the more I probably outrank them completely wrong. So let's see how we go. Hunkus Hollinger Racing, no longer black and green, is now going for pink, white and black, which I am enjoying. Interesting stuff here in Hunkus Hollinger because you've got Rinus VK back again, yet another driver that kind of bubbles under the radar and puts in some absolutely stellar results. And I think for him, he should be aiming for a top 10 in the overarching standings because he's got a year of stability, because he knew where he was driving quite early-ish on in the off-season, and he's never really been afforded that very often. And I think if anyone's a dark horse for a maiden win, or, well, future wins, I think, for Rinus VK, it will be him. And so I think this is Hunkus Hollinger's kind of best state for, or stable for a win for a while. So I'm excited to see how he performs. And I think what's interesting with this, because he's bounced around a couple of teams now, Rinus, if it doesn't go right here, it starts to turn the tale of unfulfilled potential that's never been tapped into to it's not working, and actually have we overrated his underratedness, if that's even a phrase. So that'll be interesting to see. On the other side of the fence, for me, Stingray Rob is the man that needs to prove that he deserves a place on the IndyCar grid more than anyone else. He needs a top 5 finish. Just one. He needs to show that he belongs by peaking out somewhere along the line. And I think there'll be a deficit between him and VK, and he needs to make sure that he's actively closing that over time. IndyCar shouldn't be a finishing school, but it has been for some people, and sometimes, and it's great that Indy Next allows you to do this for rookies, but Stingray's now in his, I think, 3rd season. And so you can't really afford this kind of finishing school mentality anymore and kind of getting better over time. Now is the time where you just need to show what is your ceiling. And so you better hope that his sponsorship package is chonky, because if it doesn't happen this year, he's going to need to desperately rely on that to stay on the grid for 27. Which brings us to Meyer Shank Racing with a fab livery for Felix Rosenqvist, may I add. And I think he is going to be another dark horse for wins everywhere. again, this is another one where I feel like Felix has a potential to over deliver in under delivering environments and then under deliver in over delivering expectations. That's a terrible phrase, but hopefully you know what I mean. And for me, Felix is about sneaking in those top fives, reducing down the clangers, which to be fair, I feel like he did in 2025, but there were some races with some incidents where you just go, no, that would take him out of really good results, and you just be like, why now? Do it on an anonymous weekend, not when you're absolutely caning it. So yeah, just refinement, I think, is Felix Rosenqvist's agenda for 2026, and therefore I think a dark horse win will pop out somewhere along the line, and I think he should be aiming for top 10 points overall, which is no mean feat in a Meyershank. However, I think the real surprise this year will be Marcus Armstrong. For me, this is the year, hopefully, that he will blossom into the racer and potential that I think many people feel like he could be. He has been the standout surprise in testing, superb on both the oval and when they went to Sebring, which is a weird kind of attempt of a bumpy street race in a road course environment. I'm not quite sure how that really translates across, but there we go. I think his first win will happen this year. I have a suspicion that it will be the first of a couple, maybe, but it has to be on that conversion. And he needs to make sure that he doesn't then beat himself up if it doesn't happen quite early in the season, because he's going to be one of those drivers that I think can mentally pummel himself into submission and then drop off. So mental stability and reduce the mental fatigue, I think, will be a key for Marcus Ericsson to make sure that he does blossom the way how we hope he will. And blossoming and leadership, I think, is the Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing trope for 2026. You've got Graham Rahal, who has been around in the sport for many a year now, and kind of does those, like, surprise, let's take pole at the Indy road course, and then disappear for about 10 races, and then pop up again somewhere else. And it's a shame that the RLL team are a bit like that, where they are so dip and trophy and inconsistent. But I think part of that, and this is me from the outside looking in, really like not getting anything behind the scenes, whilst you've got that inconsistency, it must be really quite difficult to truly lead a team that is then full of Louis Foster, who is in his second year, and Mick Schumacher, who is a total rookie. And the reason why I think it's quite interesting and Graham Rahal needs to be truly leading that team and taking those drivers under his wing and really cultivating them is, I'm not sure how much road there is for Graham Rahal in terms of delivery of results. I think we've seen that on his day he can be formidable, but those days are few and far between. Whereas with Louis Foster, you've got someone who has got raw pace and talent, but a tendency to overdrive, particularly around traffic, and have incidents with other drivers that feel like they were needless. And so when you reduce down that, you're almost then taking down that confidence level and starting to second guess yourself, which may impact your baseline speed. And so you'll need someone like Graham Rahal to kind of cultivate that consistency, really. And for me, it's about, can Louis Foster then step up and battle Graham Rahal for leadership in this team? And I know it's got Rahal in the name, so it's kind of leadership on track. But that will be a fascinating inter-team battle for me, and I think it will be very close. Then you've got the rookie that's grabbing all the headlines for the signing, Mick Schumacher, but I don't think he'll grab any headlines on track. And that is because when you look over Mick Schumacher's career, he is always a learn year one, show some pace year two. And so for me, you need to look at Mick Schumacher's career in a 2-season block. And they just need to leave him alone at the back, learning his craft. And I think he won't be smashing around the car, which I think Kyle Collette has more tendency to do. he will not be as fast as Dennis Hauger, which will allow him to be Rookie of the Year. And Mick Schumacher will kind of go second of those rookies, but not through pace. It will be through I kept it on the road and brought it home. And that feels odd given what his second year at Haas was like, but that's an environmental problem, not a driver problem. And that's, again, why Graham Rahal needs to truly lead the team and make this a safe, comfortable space for two raw talents to grow and develop. Because if this becomes a toxic wasteland, which Graham Rahal sometimes lets slip in the frustrations of bad results on radio and stropping around, that will in turn impact those two careers of Foster and Schumacher and drive them down with him. And so, yeah, there's a lot riding on Graham Rahal and the RLL temperament and setup to see how they go. Which brings us to the last team of Team Penske, but they will absolutely not be last in the stand-ins. This has some massive questions for me, and again I found Team Penske really difficult to rank because last year felt like a total rebuild season for them. This year they need to then come out the gates with all guns blazing, and I think the person that will do that is Scott McLaughlin. I don't think it will be Joseph Newgarden, and I don't think it can be David Malukas because he is new to the team and it's his big step-up time. Taking on Scott McLaughlin first, I think this will be his championship bid. I think he will be one of, if not the top two challengers to Alex Palou. I think because you've got Joseph Newgarden, who had a pretty poor 2025, all things considered, and he'll be looking at regaining his confidence, and you've got David Malukas settling in, Scott McLaughlin then becomes the default leader at Penske, and to kind of take charge of that and reinvent it in his vision. Off track, he's moved lots of people around to make sure that he's got the best environment around him to deliver, and that will allow him to refine his aggression, which is so great on track and very lively and amiable off track, to turn him into the lead for Penske. And I think we've got a formidable Scott McLaughlin potentially for 2026, and I'm really excited to see how that translates. Similarly, Joseph Newgarden, this, I'm not going to say it's a make or break season for him, but if he wants to keep his place in Penske long term without being like the default American, Americans are very patriotic. They take a lot of value in that. He needs to try and win back some Penske honour for himself. And so the battle between Scott and Joseph for top honours at Penske, I think, will be fascinating. But he needs to return back to basics and remember why he wins certain ovals so well, so dominantly, and then work out how do I take those basics across to other areas of the triathlon that is IndyCar, so that he doesn't just become a free track specialist, and that'll be that. And then you've got David Malukas, who I think has massive potential, but he needs to keep up with the other two, and he needs to start converting on street and road courses. He's never had a top 5 finish on either of those. All of his big finishes come on ovals, and I do think there is the opportunity for him to take a win. I think it will be on an oval if it happens at all. But how he deals with street and road courses is, for me, going to depend on where he finishes in the standings. And I find him and Joseph Newgarden very difficult to rank in my overall ranking, as you're about to see. So, here is my terrible championship predictions of the top 25 drivers as they currently are. And I'm already looking at this going, oh, Simon, what have you done? I do think Alex Palou will win 4 in 4. I think Scott McLaughlin will be his closest rival. I think Pato O'Ward will chase him all the way, but just be a couple of temps off. And I think Scott Dixon will be the wily old fox that will pick up a couple of wins here and there and sneak through it into fourth on the stand-ins. I think Marcus Armstrong will deliver on some of his promise and will sneak into the top 5s. But if he doesn't, I think he will not make the top 10 at all. Will Power, I think, will be a bit topsy-turvy and then hit a stride and go nuts for it and maybe edge out Kyle Kirkwood and Christian Lundgaard. And I kind of find this kind of 5th down to about 13th to be like a massive clump of drivers that I think could fit anywhere in this mark. And some of it will depend on confidence and not consistency, but like keeping the roll going, basically. Because if Newgarden, Ericsson, Malukas, Rossi, and I'll throw in Rosenqvist as well, they're drivers who are form and confidence dependent, and when they see a dip, it takes them a little bit to get back into the swing of things again. And so I think the early season will really put some punches in around how their seasons will develop. And so anywhere from 5th to 13th, I think, could be rearranged in all kinds of ways, like a Rubik's Cube, and it would still work. Then after kind of 13th with Rossi, I think we've then got like Division 2. And that's more out of teams as well as it is from drivers. And I think Simpson will kind of lead a lot of that. I think VK will pop in and out. You'll see I've ranked Hauger way higher than Collette and Schumacher down at the bottom. And I think Collette might kind of get a couple of decent results that will then elevate him above Schumacher to make sure that he's ahead of him in the standings. You'll see that I think Rahal and Foster will be side by side in points. I don't think Siegel will convert. I'm really concerned about him just being very anonymous. The ECR cars I found very difficult to rank. So you can see Ferrucci, Rasmussen kind of way down in 22nd, because I think it might be a bit crash happy, but equally he could be 14th. Like, again, 14 down to about 24th, I think will be fairly set in stone. I do think, though, that Stingray Rob will bring up the rear, and I'm very sorry, Stingray. But I hope I'm wrong, and I hope I'm proven wrong on most of these standings, because it's just a very extreme guess from very limited data. And I think, yeah, we'll keep a save of this and see how terrible I was at the end of the year. It's always scary when you do these types of things. So, I'm excited for everything to do with IndyCar in 2026. Let us know how you feel some of the predictions are down in the comments. Who do you think will win the title? Who do you think will have a big step forward or a big step back? What do you think are your storylines that you're most interested in? Let us know down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and keep supporting independent creators like myself with perhaps signing up on Patreon, patreon.com/Highplane Network, because Highplane Racing is just one of a number of projects that I'm running. Take care. Happy racing.